Hey, Nerd Herd, Dynasty Nerds, back again. This week we're talking veteran Dynasty players. And I know some of you might have thrown up your mouth a little bit, but there is value to be had and a savvy way to acquire.
They can be assets.
They can, but you don't always have to be a contender to go get some of these guys.
Let's dive in these vets.
Ready, set, hut, hut. Welcome to the Dynasty Nerds Fantasy Football Podcast, where we discuss dynasty strategy, rankings, and all things NFL. So get ready to geek out on fantasy football with your host, Rich Dotson.
And welcome to the Dynasty Nerds Fantasy Football Podcast.
I just remembered
Rich Dotson.
I just remembered your promise for the Nerder episode.
I literally just did too by doing that.
As soon as you started
in my
that,
head.
that's why I started smiling.
I know you did, because I remember right before that. That's why I started doing. I was like, oh no, it's the Nerd Herd Show. This is Matt O'Hara. That's Garret Price.
Hey.
Yep, I'm here.
Yeah, Nerd Herd Show. I'm gonna try it. No practice, obviously. I haven't practiced.
No.
Clearly.
And I'm gonna see how long I do that intro. It's super annoying. I'm guessing over under 30 seconds. So you taking over under?
I thought we set it at 15.
Over under 15 seconds.
All right, let's set it
You
at 20.
started with the ridiculous.
You started with a minute. You said 1 minute.
I always dream big, so I always so you can't hold that against me.
All right, I'll set it at 22 and a half.
Seconds.
22 and a half seconds. Over under.
I think 20 is better.
20?
Yeah.
Because you want to get the over.
No, it's just, I mean, I'm taking it over at 22 too. Okay, 22, no half. That's a long time. It's almost half.
It's got to be half.
22 and a half, because if you get exactly
you don't
22.
want to push. You just got to get to 23, man.
How do you know I don't want to push?
I know how you roll.
Would you rather 19 and a half?
Uh-huh.
All right. 19 and a half.
Over under?
Over under 19 and a half.
That's a long time to expel. You better really ease into that thing, man.
No, I'm just going to take a breath and I'm just going to say and.
I'm gonna take the under.
Yeah,
Sure. Well, you can turn into
Oh,
a
yeah,
nerd.
under. Definitely.
That's next show.
That's
We
next.
don't want to annoy the people that don't.
We only
that
want
are
to
part of the nerd. Like,
we
the
only
nerd,
want to
like,
name the
love
people
us.
that pay for it.
Yeah. I don't need people going on like leave us a review. Like, dude, some dude just left us a review on iTunes. He like literally it drives me crazy. Like he literally lied. Like, oh, I'm not gonna repeat what he said, but it's like I hate when people go on there and it's like they make up like literally lies of what you said. It was like, oh, I'm gonna just do it a 1-star. He's like, he said this, and this, and this, and I'm like, I never said that stuff.
That.
Like,
That's not even true.
Well, maybe I said it, and he just doesn't know our voices.
Read review. Trust me, nobody ever said that stuff on our show, and nobody's. I don't think anybody's confusing your voice with my voice. You can put G's at the end of your words and don't have a lisp.
That's true.
Not me. I'm like Daffy Duck over here. I don't know what's going on. So
Maybe that's why he was just having a hard time understanding.
yeah, I literally thought you said something else for me. I was like, this show is PG. Next show, say whatever you want. It's a Nerd Herd show. And let me tell you about the Nerd Herd and how you can join the Nerd Herd as well. Like if you hit up at our partners over at Underdog, I think they just opened up in another state. I can't remember what it was. I don't know if it's Arizona or something. They just opened up in another state.
Another one.
And Underdog Fantasy right now has so much going on. We talked last week about the Scott Fishbowl entries for next year. Those are only $5. That's a great way to get like not only like donate to a really good cause, but get into a really cool concert. I think contest. It's like up to 3,324 entries this year.
That's wild.
I came top 10 2 years ago. Just guys want to like just admire me, sit there and look at me for a little bit. Yeah, you're welcome.
That's what I'm doing right now.
That's
my
my presence.
Yep.
My presence is a present alone. Underdog. It's just, besides that, it's just a ton of fun. Like we all love the draft. Like as August gets to roll around here, even us dynasty enthusiasts who don't even enjoy the game of redraft, but we do enjoy the draft process. Underdogs will give you just that. You go on there, you sign up, you can pay $25 to win a chance to win $3 million. You can join smaller pools. You can play with just your friends and create, just your friends can join leagues, $3 leagues, $5 leagues, $25, $100 leagues, 3-man, 2-man, heads up, 6-man. Like there's so many different options to go on there. I'm constantly drafting and you should too. Get out there, download the site, use the promo code NERDS. They're going to match your deposit up to $100. But on top of that, here at Dynasty Nerds, we're going to give you a hookup to the Nerd Herd. And the Nerd Herd is just access to more content and more tools, right?
Yep.
When we play Dynasty, I tweeted something about Rich Rebar and his content over at Sharp Analysis, who does, literally, in my opinion, he's probably one of the best analysts in the entire game.
He's fantastic, yeah.
And, tools and knowledge is where you win. That's power, right? Like, there's already a lot of luck in there, and you don't need to, you just need a little bit more, right? Like I said, we get these emails. We just got an email the other day about somebody who made a trade for Daniel Jones on our recommendation. He won the championship last year, and he gave us great things. Shout out, Colonel. We'll be talking soon. And, with the Nerd Herd, you're going to get our tools, access to our app. We have the first app in the business that does what our app does. And that alone is worth the $10 deposit you're going to put in there. But then you get access to the film room. You get access to the Nerd Score, the extra podcast, which is crucial, definitely with all the shows that we do out here. So
especially in rookie season.
A little entertainment. And again, my biggest thing I said this for years, like when you do join the Nerd Herd, like that money just goes right back in the Dynasty community. Like we have one goal here and one goal only, and that's to like create as many tools as possible and get you guys all the information and make everything easier for you, because we all want to join more leagues, and that's what the GM tool does. So check out that. Download the Dynasty GM today. To see if, like, say, hey, I might join Underdog, I might not. It'd be cool to get the free year. Like, download our app and just check it out. It's free to download, and you can kind of interact with it in a free version. Yeah. And see, like, hey, yeah, this is like, let me get my teams in here. Like, Flea Flicker, FFPC, Sleeper, MFL, and so many more to come. We're going to add Yahoo, ESPN down the road here as well. So get out there, check it out. Underdog, download the app, use the promo code NERDS, win $3 million, and even more importantly, can't even put a price on the Nerd Herd. So check that out.
Except we did put a price on it. And you get it a lot cheaper by doing it this way.
And do it again.
We had to put a price on it. It was part of the stipulations.
So today we're talking veterans, in Dynasty. And at the end of the show, the second half of the show,
fitting with the 4th of July.
It is fitting with the 4th of July, and it's why we're doing it.
We planned it that way.
That was definitely
the whole
planned.
time.
Yeah, shout out vets. So veterans, we're going to talk about a couple players as we get through this. Like maybe some guys that we think are good veteran buys. But let's start the show off. Let's just talk veterans, because if there's one thing that people feel are icky in Dynasty Fantasy Football,
Ew.
It's veterans, right? Like,
I was gonna do it too, but I thought 3 oohs was too much.
That's one too many U's.
Yeah.
So they're not that.
They're
gross.
not that gross.
oh,
right?
dude, if that was like harmonious, like I'd almost think it was kind of hot.
Ew.
I ruined it. My ooze gross. I'm sorry. But I mean, veteran. It's probably one of the it's easy in Dynasty to sit here and like, oh, let's talk youth. Like everybody wants it. Like everybody wants it. Everybody's stashing it. It doesn't even matter if the guy's that good, because like, hey, I'm gonna stash him because I got time, baby. When you play Dynasty, it's forever. And we're gonna kind of go through each of our takes on this and kind of talk it out together and kind of like, I know you have something to say. Matt might have something to say about it. I don't know. We're gonna find out.
He's eye candy. It doesn't matter.
That's the thing when you get the Dynasty Nerds show.
I have to talk on this thing?
Yeah. Like all these other shows have all these long show sheets about what's going on. Not us. Not us.
Not prepared for this, guys.
Matt, we pay you whether you say anything or not. Just tell us the receiver you like that year and smile and look good.
You get paid?
Jeez.
Wow.
You guys are getting paid for this?
Wait, you don't?
I always knew it was a chump.
You've seen We're the Millers, right? Where they're talking about how much they're each getting paid, and then the last kid's like, wait, you guys are getting paid for this?
Oh, yeah, I do remember that part. Yeah.
That was a good movie.
I'll say this to start off about veterans. Like, I think, and I've said this many times over the years on this podcast, and it's one of those things I'll probably say until I'm done doing the podcast, and that's I love Dalton Kincaid. No.
That's true.
It is that I think a huge problem in Dynasty where people look at it is when you look at it is like this guy has 2 years left. Like a guy hits 28 and you're like he has 2 years left. That's it. And for the most part, that is true, right? Like the age 30 is a cliffhanger. We're usually like
not a cliffhanger.
Not a cliffhanger. It's a cliff.
What's going to happen next?
Oh no!
It's going to be done.
My point was,
not a booger
it's a
hanging
cliff.
out of the
Well, I was just, the visual that popped in my head.
Now maybe self-conscious.
It was Sylvester Stallone back when that 90s movie was hanging for the cliff. You know, like I was like, and that's what you hope. Like you hope as they fall off the cliff that they can
catch
slide
something on the way
Stallone.
down.
Yeah, they're slide Stallone and they're like, no, one more, yeah, Adrian. God, I can't even do impressions good. What am I good at besides saying draft Daniel Jones? You know what I mean? Like, so they go over the cliff, but they're Sly Stallone. They're holding on for that one more year. But outside of that, like 28, and definitely with the way athletes train these days, the way modern medicine is, like you would expect that these players would be able to start playing like just a little bit longer. And every year counts. We talk about it with running backs all the time. Like they lose 1 year, odds are they've lost 25% of their total value by missing 1 year for injury. But I think when you say like that player's only got 2 years left, mostly at the, whether it be tight end position, the quarterback position, or more importantly, I think the vast majority here is the receiver position, is that 2 years is a long time in Dynasty. Mm-hmm. If you go back and you just look at, like, if you have league history on Sleeper, MFL, Flea Flicker, FFPC, just go back and look into your league history and click on 2021's league year.
Yep.
And go back and look at the teams. Like, even look at your own team, you'll be a little like, oh, I forgot I had that guy on my roster. Like, there's so much information coming in at all times on podcasts that we listen to, on Twitter. Like, there's so much information. There's so many moves you're constantly making. You forget how much turnover you have on your rosters. And have an opportunity to have a player that you know will produce for the most part. Because some of these guys you know will produce. Whether it be at a wide receiver 2 range, a quarterback 2 range, or potentially a wide receiver 1, running back 1, quarterback 1 range. 2 years is such a long time in a game of Dynasty Fantasy Football.
Well, look at just last year, for example, at the running back position, which is the one that has the shortest lifespan. Guys that, once they hit that roughly 26-year-old range, we're kind of writing them off. Anything they get after that point is bonus.
For sure. Yep.
But look at all the guys that would have been at or around that range that we would consider older running backs last year inside the top 12. Austin Eckler, Christian McCaffrey, Derrick Henry, Nick Chubb, probably Tony Pollard, honestly.
No, he's still young.
He's 27.
Yeah, I think he's 26.
Let's not say him.
I wouldn't consider Nick Chubb or Pollard in that. I feel like once you hit 20, I guess, at 27, people start to get real weird.
Okay. All right. But then still Aaron Jones, Joe Mixon, Dalvin Cook, Leonard Fournette. So even not counting those like mid-range guys, over half we would consider like older running backs. So these old guys that are not crazy expensive can still absolutely contribute.
Jamaal Williams, I think running back.
He was the very next one, 13.
Yeah. I mean, dude,
13,
if you go to
28,
Garret, you don't have to stop there. I mean, just look at the running back twos. Like you said, Jamaal Williams was in that thing.
Alvin Kamara's in that range. James Conner's in that range. Ezekiel Elliott's in that range. Yep. Jerick McKinnon.
Yeah. So those like
Montgomery.
50% of these guys are like guys that you really don't raw on a roster. I remember I gave up a first and something 2 years ago for Ezekiel Elliott. I mentioned this podcast, and there's another analyst who's well respected in the industry kind of like gave me a little crap about it. I was like, dude, what are you talking about? Like, you're like, I strongly disagree. And I literally got 2 more years of Zeke Elliott as a running back 1, essentially. So like, there's value here, definitely at the running back age as well, and wide receiver age. Like, to go out and get these veterans and being okay with that window. Like, I think the biggest thing here when I say 2 years, like, you have to be okay with a 2-year window. And it's fun to watch these prospects grow in the true NFL stars or true NFL contributors. But I think it's easy to forget about like the couple years it took for them to get into that role as well. Like, not everybody just comes out guns blazing. Like, you'll know they'll contribute, there'll be spots, but then you go back and look like, oh, Devontae Adams was wide receiver 42. Like, like, oh, wow, it took him a couple years to come into his own. You think of some of these great wide receivers that didn't hit the floor running. They take time. They go from a wide receiver 3 or low-end wide receiver 2 to a wide receiver 2, then to a wide receiver 1 for multiple times. Or running back. I mean, running back obviously literally hits the ground running.
Yeah, usually, yeah.
But you forget about like that years that took up to get to that point, and then usually you're hoping to get that 3 to 6 year window, right? Like, so 3 to 6 years. So if you can get 2 more years of a proven asset, you're getting 25% value on a first. That's a complete gamble in the first place. Because when you're talking about some of these guys, well, you're either talking about like a single first round pick. A lot of times that's like the golden pot that gets a lot of these deals done. Sure. Like if you throw a first in front of somebody, or maybe 2 seconds can get it done for these kind of guys.
And going back to your Ezekiel Elliott point, even if you get 2 years out of a guy, you're getting running back 1 numbers out of there. If you need that kind of player for a championship run, that's 100% worth it for just the peace of mind. Because what happens if you say you draft a running back with that first round, one of those first round draft picks that you traded for this guy, and what if it's Darius Geis? What if it's a guy that just gets injured in his first? I mean, Breece Hall. Like, you needed this guy for a championship run. He gets injured his first year. Right. That kind of stuff can happen as well with those draft picks. So those draft picks they look nice, they look sexy. They're no guarantee of any sort of production for your fantasy team. Sometimes it's good to get the guarantee 2 years as opposed to this question mark for who knows?
How are they going to pan out?
How are they actually going to pan out? Yeah.
And those are like, you have to remember, first of all, first round picks are consistently going to turn out to be at best average. Some are going to miss. And you mentioned guys, like
Darius Geis.
Right. Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So we went through the 1-1. You can argue even like DeAndre Swift, who went later after that. J.K. Dobbins in the same draft class. Cam Akers. You go back before, I used that LaShawn McCoy draft class because LaShawn McCoy is the fourth running back going in most of those drafts. It was Donald Brown, Beanie Wells, and Knowshon Moreno that went through. And I think Knowshon ended up being the best one out of the group. Beanie was okay. Even Donald Brown was but they were just like okay at best kind of guys. Like nothing's guaranteed with first. So I think what you're trying to say is like always take the first, like if you're a contender. Like so obviously when we start there too. If you're it doesn't end there, but for 89% of the time.
89, very specific.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not quite 90.
Not quite there. Almost.
89.
No, what's something funny I heard?
I would say 89 and a half.
I saw online, somebody was like, I'll be there at 4:12. And the guy was like, well, that's very specific
That's
of you.
Why
that?
Oddly specific.
And he's like, well, if I told you 4 o'clock, that's specific as well. And I was like, that's a good point.
I guess that is.
I mean, all times. If you say any time, it is specific.
It's specific. So what percent? Like if I say 90, like that's pretty exact too. To give you an exact, I'm not saying 80 to 89. I'm saying 89%.
All right.
So
it's math.
R for, veterans, but I'm sorry, contenders, but not always.
Right. Yeah. No, there's situations where, especially in startups, but sometimes in trades too, where you might not be a team that you think is a legitimate contender, but sometimes you see the price tag on a certain player, whether that would be the round you're drafting in or in a trade, and you're thinking to yourself, especially if you're getting close to draft time, rookie draft time, because those veterans are so severely discounted at those times. And, that's something that, we've talked about before, but I think is always worth bringing back up, kind of the life cycle of Dynasty. And I think Eric Kortz made an awesome graphic to kind of like show you when is rookie the cheapest and when is it the most expensive? When's a veteran the cheapest? When's it the most expensive? So if you're at that rookie time and you're looking at it and you're like, man, this guy's just way too cheap. There are times where I will buy that player despite me not thinking I can win this year, knowing that I can get an extra second round pick in 2 months when the season starts, or I can turn that second round pick I traded it for into a first round pick later. Does it work 100% of the time?
Always gamble.
No.
Right? Yeah.
All of it is a gamble. Yeah. All of this that we ever talk about, none of it is for sure. But you take calculated and educated guesses on trends of players and what they do, and especially looking at, okay, I see 2 teams that they could probably use a running back. I'm going to take this guy now, and I'm going to hang it over their heads later and see how much I can get. There are always those kinds of opportunities, especially it seems like at the running back position.
And to your point about everything being a risk and all that kind of stuff, it's just like the stock market. I mean,
100%.
Anything could be risky, and you could always lose your ass or your butt in any single given transaction. But if you stay with the trends, the long-term trend is up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you got to stay with that. You got to keep going, even if you do have a down trade or a bad trade or something like that doesn't turn out. Keep going. I mean, you got to stick with these trends, stick kind of with your gut on some of these things, and in the long run, it will work out.
So here's a good example of a player that would kind of fall into this category in a specific trade. So I see on here James Conner is a guy that I've kind of looked at as if I need an older player that's not sexy, not exciting, but could put up some really good numbers still this year. James Conner is one of those guys that I've kind of identified.
100%.
So here's a trade where you give up your 26. So 4 years out, you're giving up your 26 second round pick, and you get James Conner and a third back. You know what could happen week 2 of the season? One of these running backs we love blows their knee out, and all of a sudden that team needs a reliable starting running back. Even if worst case scenario, all you get is now you get a 24 second. Well, now you just moved up 2 whole years on that second round pick
and gotten a third back,
and you got a third
in the deal as well.
Yeah. So those kind of little deals, those little moves, sometimes can pay dividends. So yes, typically you want to be a contending team when you're going after these older veteran players. but it's not exclusive to just those kind of teams.
Yeah, 100%. I make those kind of moves all the time. And the time to make those moves is, like Garrett said, it's during, March, April, May, June, July. That's the time to really start making those moves. Definitely, like you said, during the draft. Because there comes times on teams where people literally just want to get that player. Yeah, I could not tell you how many trades I've made, and people are like, that's all you got him for. It's because somebody, like, when you see somebody out there and they put like more than one message out there, like, hey, I'm trying to trade this guy. For the most part, a lot of times, those people just want them off your roster.
Yeah, they're thinking about cutting them, and they just want to get something.
When Christian McCaffrey was hurt, I got him before last year started a first, like just a first straight up.
Well,
because he wanted to get rid of him off his roster.
He wasn't going to cut him, but yeah.
Yeah, he wasn't going to cut him, but like, there's always maneuvers out there, and sometimes like depends on the level of player. But a third, and I think James Conner is a great. Like he's on my list of if you need a veteran running back, James Conner is probably the cheapest, best option.
Potential RB1 that you could have. Yeah, here's another one, James Conner for Rashee Rice. You're drafting Rashee Rice in the middle of the third, probably early third.
Second.
He could go back half second,
maybe, but either way, you're paying a late second to early third, of value. You can easily get way more than that in season for a guy like James Conner.
100%. And that's a move like what Garrett said. Is like you're just thinking ahead. Like, can I move up just a little bit here? Can I use that? Can I give a third and James Conner and get somebody's first who's a contender? Mm-hmm. And as long as you have the time to be patient and this player can stay healthy, that usually does work out in your favor unless they fall on their face. But like Garrett said, you're picking and choosing who these players are. I think James Conner is a great one for that exact same move that you said, or if you're a contender.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So when you're talking about veteran running backs, I think those guys are easy to buy because like the cliff falls off so quick. So once they hit 28, like they're almost a second rounder and get it done. I think James Conner get bought for a second rounder.
Yeah.
And you're looking again at a running back whose team is in complete disarray. Most likely, Kyler Murray won't be back until week 8, somewhere around there. So it's going to be Colt McCoy in there. Their receiving core, no more DeAndre Hopkins. We don't even know if Zach Ertz going to start the season. I know they got Trey McBride, who's young. They got Rondale Moore.
They didn't draft a running back.
And they did not bring in a single running back. And you're talking about a player that, he was pretty much banged up last year. But when he came back later in the year, like I think it was almost halfway through the year, like right around week 9 or so, like he had like a decent amount of rushing yards.
He was an RB1 on points per game. He was an RB1 last year. Yeah. So and it's a defensive-minded head coach.
Right.
So often when you have those defensive-minded head coaches, they tend to run the ball a little more ball control, and they want to win with their defense. So there's a lot setting up for him specifically. But we're not even necessarily just talking about James Conner. We're talking about the concept of getting these veteran players in general.
He just, when you said his name,
fits perfectly.
He's my favorite contender by running back. A true probably workhorse running back, more so than I'd say probably 3/4 of the rest of the league. Like the role that he's going to carry is going to be so much different than most of the other running backs. Like a true bell cow running back. But then he falls, and when I say it, I think he's cheaper when you throw other names in that category, right? Like Joe Mixon, Aaron Jones. Yeah. You mentioned Nick Chubb earlier. These guys that can be had for, Nick Chubb is going to cost you a first and probably a second. Yep. I think that's good value. Joe Mixon's borderline. You probably get him for maybe a couple seconds and a young guy.
Especially with all the contract stuff coming out about him.
And still the rumors that he might not.
His ADP is running back 21, Joe Mixon's, and he's the 81st player off the board. Nick Chubb's is running back 16 dynasty-wise, running back 60, or player 60 off the board.
Yeah, and where's Joe Mixon?
81 and running back 21.
So he's down there pretty low as well. And you said there's a lot of worried about. And out of all the guys, Joe Mixon's the youngest. He's 26. So he's the youngest out of all those guys. Aaron Jones was still super efficient last year. He had over 1,500 yards rushing. Had I can't remember how many touchdowns he had, but he was another very solid running back that can be had easily for a first.
Aaron Jones had 7 total, two rushing and 5.
One that's being treated like an old guy. He's actually below Joe Mixon, and same range as Dalvin Cook. He's only one spot ahead of Dalvin Cook. Miles Sanders, and he's not even as old as those guys. He's running back 22 off the board, pick 86, and I think he's going to get a stupid amount of work this year.
Stupid amount of work. He can be had probably for a first.
Maybe even 2 seconds.
I can't imagine.
He's going behind Joe Mixon. If we think Joe Mixon can go for 2 seconds, he's being drafted behind Joe Mixon.
It's so weird because every league is always so
every
different.
league is different.
You know what I mean? I gave up my first and second, like a second and future year, and I got Joe Mixon and Dalvin Cook. Before this year's draft started, the league you and I are, the Ohio Dino League.
Yeah.
Like I gave up a first and second. I got Joe Mixon and Dalvin Cook. On a team where I could use another running back, but like Joe Mixon, again, a bell cow running back. Like I'm not too worried about Chase Brown coming in there and really doing what Joe Mixon does. And I'm not overly concerned about even Joe Mixon. Like he has to take this pay cut. Like we're well into June. Like we're going to mini camp. Like unless they brought in like, and what you hear, like what Dalvin Cook wants, like unless they're cutting Joe Mixon for Dalvin Cook, like Joe Mixon's a solid running back. Like is he elite? No, but again, he can catch the football and he's going to be their 3-down back. Like there's value there. Yep. Aaron Jones is a very talented running back. James Conner's going to get all the carries. So if you're a contender and you think Joe Mixon's got 2 more years left, if Aaron Jones got 2 more years left, it might not be both of the Packers, but 2 more years left, you have to be comfortable at the receiver position, not outside of the receiver position or running back position, receiver, tight ends, and running backs. You have to be comfortable giving up that draft capital to go for that championship and buy these veterans.
So a fun little exercise that I was kind of doing in my head while we were talking about all this, if I were to only target players that were ADP of 100 or lower, which means I'm able to probably just give up a second, maybe multiple seconds to get these guys.
Usually 2 seconds.
What kind of team could I build? So just looking off of this, Aaron Rodgers is below 100 ADP. Aaron Jones, Alvin Kamara, David Montgomery. So there's 3 running backs that that would be a great stable of running backs to have. Tight end, Darren Waller, I could get after that point. David Njoku, I could get after that point. Wide receiver, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Mike Evans. So like you could build an entire team off of just trading like seconds and thirds, and you could win it this year with those kind of players.
Yeah, it's a maneuver to make. Keenan Allen fits that mold perfectly. You're talking about a guy who consistently, when he's healthy, goes on the field and produces at a high level. Like consistently. You said he has an ADP below 500. He falls in that category for me last year that kind of was injured for a little bit, so you saw his ADP fall a little bit more. The writing's on the wall to Quentin Johnson. Like he's probably out after this year. We thought potentially he'd be out this year, and they ended up guaranteeing his contract for him. But when he comes back in, this is a guy who catches a ton of footballs, right? Like when he was healthy last year, he came back. I don't think he was fully healthy until like later in the year. So the second half of the year, the bottom third of the year, like he was top 5, top 4 in receptions amongst all wide receivers of value on a team that's got Justin Herbert that's going to throw the football a ton. Mm-hmm. Mike Evans consistently puts up decent numbers. And yeah, Baker's there, but
right.
If Baker's not getting done, they're going to put Kyle Trask in anyways. Like, and this is a team that will potentially struggle with no strong running game. Mike Evans is a great potential buy there as well.
And he's already making, proclamations that he wants to be the guy to break the record for 1,000-yard consecutive seasons and all that kind of stuff. So he wants it. He's driven. He wants to do it. And it's not like Baker is incapable of getting a guy the ball. You know what I mean? I do think he is, especially a guy that is big as Mike Williams with that kind of catch radius. If there were issues with Baker here in Cleveland, it was maybe some off-target throws and stuff like that. But Mike Evans kind of hides and masks some of that stuff, I think, with his size. So he is a guy that I think has great value right now, and he's being completely discounted. I mean, Tom Brady left, and everyone feels like you don't want to touch any of those Buccaneers. Out of those Buccaneers left, I feel like he's a guy I wouldn't mind having. Cade Otton, the young tight end from last year,
love Cade Otton,
is another guy that I really, really like in that offense. So it's not like it's not as desolate and horrible there in Tampa Bay that I think that everyone makes it out to be.
Not a receiver, no. Chris Godwin's an absolute stud.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
So those guys could be and people. Your instant, you thought process and it was like, oh, gross. But people always like, why don't you have your first? Because these are guys I'm attacking because I'm okay with giving my first next year to have a player that I'm going to have for 2 years. Because I feel like I'm giving up a late first. And then by the time my team is ready to fall apart when he comes off, I'll still have my first for that year down the road. And Mike Evans is a great Keenan Allen. These guys are 31. You're talking about another 31-year-old, another guy who right now is probably disgustingly cheap, DeAndre Hopkins.
I thought of something just now. I want you guys to tell me if I'm crazy, because I like to mess around with different startup strategies and things like that. And when I was talking about all the players you could get after, pick 100, I wonder if you went and did a semi-productive struggle where you traded the first 6 rounds of your draft, let's say hypothetically. You traded
I know what you're saying. I know
all of
somebody
those
did it.
for picks, so you have a ton of future picks. But then you also, when you made that deal, like, give me your first and your 8th round pick. Or give me your first next year, like your 2024 first and your 8th next year. And just have, 15 picks within round 7 to, whatever.
Sure.
It would be like combining. I could win now with this lineup because I'm drafting Alvin Kamara and Aaron Rodgers and all of these old guys. But I would also have a stupid amount of picks for the future. So
to
it's
backload.
it's kind of like the win now married with the.
Yeah.
Izzy Alcafast did that.
Did he?
He said, him and I were talking by text probably like a month or so ago for this Kings Classic draft. He's like, same thing. He kept pushing back his draft trading. He's like, dude, he's like, last year or 2 years ago, he's like, I did this it was meant to be a productive struggle where I kept trading back until like the 5th, 6th round. And I had a whole bunch of all these like from like 6th to like 10th round picks. He's like, I won the league. Because it's possible. It's 100% possible. Like
I don't even know what you would call that. It's like productive struggle meets win now. Like, it's a really odd concept, but like the more I think about it, I was like, shoot, that could work.
Because then you reload.
You rebuild right away with all of the new.
It's the productive win now.
It's the productive win now. Yeah.
Yeah. You get all
The win now struggle.
next year. It's a good strategy.
I might have to try that.
not
All
a
right.
bad idea.
I'm joining another startup.
Wait. It's the classic win-win.
The win-win-win.
Oh, the classic win-win.
The win-win strategy. I like
Because
that.
he told me, he's like, I might flip the script and try and do it again this league too. Because there's when you're in startups, those guys just sit there and they sit there. Nobody wants to draft them.
No.
How late?
You play chicken with those guys.
How long? If you're doing a startup right now, like how long till DeAndre Hopkins go? You know what I mean?
Oh,
Like,
it's easily 7th, 8th round.
So we talked
Easily.
Keenan Allen. We talked Mike Evans. Those are great veteran buys. DeAndre Hopkins can be had for almost nothing right now. And he produced last year. I mean, he had a suspension, came back a little knee injury, but you're talking about somebody, he averaged 7 catches, 80 yards per game. This is somebody who would produce for your team.
He's the
when he signed for
94th player off the board, wide receiver 36 currently in the Nerds ADP.
I was looking at him at a point per game basis. 11 last year is where
11 overall.
Yeah.
For free. I mean,
For
dirt
free.
cheap
Yeah.
you can have them.
Right, exactly.
I mean, maybe it costs you a second, maybe, but do you don't think you can give like some upside player? I know, like you don't think you can give Rashad. Most people probably want to do that. You don't think you can get DeAndre Hopkins plus a third for Rashad White if you need a receiver?
You might be able to.
Yeah, you might be able to. I mean, so the guy that's right above him, Michael Thomas. I know it was a much smaller sample size. When he was in the game, when he played those first 3 games, 22 points, 18.5, and then the last game it was 9.9, so almost 10 points a game. For a guy that, like, I looked on the trade browser, he's going for like 3rd round draft picks and stuff. I mean, these guys are dirt cheap. And from all the reports and everything that I've been reading, the reason Derek Carr decided to go there because he sat there, talked to Michael Thomas. Michael Thomas and him are on the same page, and he's finally healthy. You know, he's in the off-season program. Right. He's out there working out with Derek Carr, making working on the rapport together and all that kind of stuff.
3rd round pick.
3rd round draft pick for Mike Thomas, who's a 30-year-old guy who's before his injuries was all world.
He falls into probably the James Conner role where now James Conner to me is a little bit more of like a fact kind of thing going on. Like he's gonna give you something. Like Michael Thomas is a huge.
Oh, he's a big time if.
Yeah, but for a 3rd round pick,
3rd round draft,
definitely if you're a contender. And like right now, nobody's really looking like this time of the year. Like nobody's really looking if you're a contender or not. Like they know your team's good, but they hear a 3rd round pick from Michael Thomas and they're not a good team. They're like, give it to me.
I know it's been a while since we've seen him, so I get it when people are skeptical about Michael Thomas. Last time he was on the field for a full season, 1,725 yards. And I feel like he's a great fit for what Derek Carr is good at. Like Derek Carr was pushing the ball down the field. He had one of the worst percentages downfield. Like he's just not a great downfield passer. He did a ton of them. He was up there as far as the ranks. I think he ranked like 4th or 5th in downfield throws. But he was like out of the top 10, he was the absolute worst percentage wise. He was down at like 31%. For reference, he had 72, I think. And at 31%, he completed about 22 balls. For reference, Tua was down there he only had 50 50 passes, but his percentage was such that, like he already outpaced him with just 50. He had 27 receptions of 20 yards downfield or more. So he's just not very good at that. But Michael Thomas is one of these guys, you get him the ball on a slant
boy,
and he does the rest. You know what I mean? And he
bread and butter.
And that's great both for, Michael Thomas, because I feel like that's kind of a glove in hand fit for him and Derek Carr, but it's great for Derek Carr as well to have this kind of guy and be like picking his brain right now and kind of getting on the same page right now. It's something Michael Thomas hasn't been able to do for the past 3 seasons with the quarterback, is get on the same page with a veteran quarterback and in the off season and work out. So I feel like this might be the year where he kind of comes back and does some stuff. Do I expect him to do it for another 4 years? No. But
price tag.
But for another 2 years, a third-round draft pick.
1 year. Give me 1 year. If I'm a contender, give me one. Take the 24. If DeAndre Hopkins and Michael Thomas can give me 1 year, this year, and that's it, and I'm giving up anything, if I'm giving up a late second for DeAndre Hopkins and I'm giving up a third, ends up being a late third for Michael Thomas, I give up those 2 picks, and that's who I acquire. And I have 2 good receivers, and the rest of my receivers are somewhat sketchy. Now I just gave up a second and third. I got 2 receivers that could potentially be wide receiver 1s, and I just need one of them to hit right now. And that's it. And if it's just 1 year, everything on top of that for what you paid is gravy.
If the other one's a wide receiver 3, good, that's great. He's depth on the bench. If these guys are running back 2s, this is great. If they end up in the running back 1, the wide receiver 1 range, you just hit a jackpot. You know what I mean? Like that is that's what championships are built on. That's the crazy gambles you got to take to sometimes push your team over the top. You know what I mean?
I said it a couple of years ago in this podcast is like, I look for these kind of players, like when I know and I've said it on the show a couple of times, but when I know my team's a contender, like 100%, like my team's going to make the playoffs. I see where I stand in this league. Even if I lose a guy here and there, I probably still make the playoffs. This is the time of year in around draft class. Like I love start buying these guys. Like this is where like my draft compensation, all my draft picks become very, very fluid. Definitely in contenders years because I know they're late picks. So I know the first is, might be iffy. I know my second's super iffy. Every pick on top of that is pretty much worthless. So when I can start throwing picks out there for guys like, Michael Thomas, I give up a third. And I know it's going to be like, it's a useless pick to me.
It's basically a 4th-round draft pick.
Yeah. If I get DeAndre Hopkins for a second, it's pretty much a useless pick to me. Like to grab that depth. So I like to get rid of, I like to spend those assets to ensure, not again, like Matt said, not even for their start on my team. Like I don't need starters. Right. Like I need guys that are going to come in here and just give me depth. Like I got Julio Jones. He didn't do anything that year. Like that year, the year before that, he still didn't do anything. And I got him for ended up being a late second. Like I was willing to risk it in case Julio could come back and give me something. You know what I mean? Like buying those depth pieces. And they're always out there because once you hit that age 30, you're screaming discount because everybody's head's going, oh, he's only got 1 year left. He's only got 2 years left. I got to get out now. I got to get something. And for most people, they're literally thinking, I got to get something. And it's just something.
Yeah. I mean, Brandon Cooks we haven't even spoken about him today. I know we do that nauseum at other times, but
almost every year.
Yeah. Going from, Houston over to Dallas now.
It's been a fantastic buy every single year.
The situation is only going to get better going from Houston and their situation last year to Dallas. You know what I mean? Like he has the potential to be the number 2 target there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's CeeDee Lamb going to be gobbling a ton, but it's going to be Brandon Cooks and Michael Gallup kind of fighting over who's the number 2 target in that offense.
Well, I want to make sure I say this because where there's also good value is at FFPC.com. FFPC launched in 2010, home to the largest high-stakes dynasty community in fantasy football. Over 1,000 active leagues. Look, you say, I want to do a $100 league. Cool. I want to do a $5,000 league. Huh? That's just your entry. That's not everybody else's entry. That's just your entry, $5,000. So you can flex. You can flex a little bit in some of these leagues, dropping some high dollar amounts. But even if you drop those high dollar amounts, you don't have to worry about the league folding. You don't have to worry about what happens to my investment, this team that have put time and energy in. And at this point, if you're spending this much money, you are looking at these teams as an investment. It's not just, oh, I want to have fun. No, I just spent $5,000 on this league. I want to make sure that all the time, effort, and energy that I put into this comes out.
And plus, you just gave up 3 third-round draft picks for DeAndre Hopkins,
Right.
Michael Thomas, and whatever running
Brandon
back.
Cooks.
Yeah, there you go, Brandon Cooks.
Your great wide receiver room. No running backs, but you have a great wide receiver room. Head over to FFPC.com. You can look at new leagues that are happening. You can take over some orphans. At this point, the orphan teams are a little bit dried up. Usually you got to get to those right as the season's ending, but you still might find 1 or 2 there that you might want to take a look at. But if you do that, go over to myffpc.com. Use the promo code NERDS, and you will get $25 off your entry. That's right. Promo code NERDS for $25 off any entry for new members.
So is there anything else you guys want to talk about veterans before we even dive into some more players here? Like,
let's talk about some specific guys that we like, because we've touched on some of them, but I think that there's a few that we see as especially standing out as good value.
Okay. I think a guy who to me stands out as really good value, and it's probably just for 1 year, but I think this player is going to be, his value got more depressed on draft day, and that's Tyler Lockett, the Seattle Seahawks. You know, one of those players who's been criminally probably like undervalued in the eyes of most fantasy players here for probably the last 5 or 6 years.
As soon as DK Metcalf got drafted, I feel like he got largely discounted.
Yeah. So, but now with the Jackson Smith and Jigba draft, like you would think even more so, right? Geno Smith coming off that, over 70% completion percentage. So he's coming back again for this year. And Lockett has just quietly swept in there. And these are the guys that I love. And we kind of hampered on like Robert Woods about this, where they're consistently just wide receiver 2s. And Lockett has had a wide receiver 1 finish. But like besides that, every single year he's been a top 16 fantasy football wide receiver. Every single year. That's a championship caliber player. That's not just a regular player. That's a championship caliber player.
Yeah.
And albeit, again, this is probably his last year. He's going to turn 31 years old. And maybe he'll probably go sign somewhere outside of Seattle, kind of like Adam Thielen did. But in the same offense, still with Geno Smith, and having that quarterback that is an accurate quarterback and that guy who runs really efficient routes, and that's how he wins. We also still got speed at the stage as well. Again, you're probably talking about somebody you can get for a late second. I mean, he's still going to cost you because
you might even be able to get him for a third. I mean, you're looking at his ADP. He's down in the 130s in startups. So
I understand that. I just feel like if you own, so if this is a difference. In the outside view of Tyler Lockett, most people are like, they don't think about him. If you own Tyler Lockett, you know what he's been giving you.
Sure.
So for somebody just to come for you with a third, like, I don't think that would get it done. Like, I think Michael Thomas can get done for a third. Same reason I don't think DeAndre Hopkins would get it done for a third. He's not even
I don't think it would, but he's 20-some spots ahead, 30-some spots ahead.
But I think a sort of AT, I don't think that, like, I think when you get down that low, I think Tyler Lockett's going to cost you probably a second round pick. Maybe. Now, again, you think second round pick for a player that's probably going to have 1 year, like what a waste. But you have to go back and think again. You're talking about pick number 20 to 24 overall in the rookie class next year. And a player that you hopefully would trade that second round pick for to fill into your wide receiver 3 slot. Right. Who's giving you top 16 overall numbers consistently. Like he has a track record of doing that over and over and over again.
Can I read you some failed second round draft picks from 2020?
Oof. Sure.
Just from our league. Anthony McFarlane. Crickets. That guy went 204. Brian Edwards.
Anthony McFarlane out of Maryland. Thought he'd be good in Pittsburgh.
I liked him.
Laviska Shenault.
We not like
him. He was going to suck.
Zach Moss.
Never a Zach Moss fan.
Oh, the Ball Blast girls sure loved him a ton.
Chase Claypool. I mean,
to be determined.
He had a year, but it is not looking good anymore.
Probably not.
And then Van Jefferson went in that league as well.
Yeah.
Telling me there's a chance.
Oh, still definitely a chance on Van. Definitely a chance. But same thing, like out of those players, like so Chase Claypool is probably out of all those players the best note that you'd want still, right? Like,
so those were the guys that were like questionable. There were some good guys in there as well. Joe Burrow, Keyshawn Vaughn. Keyshawn Vaughn went in.
Is Joe Burrow good?
Joe Burrow's pretty good.
Oh, okay.
Okay, but who were picks 20 through 24?
20 through 24. Laviska Shenault, Zach Moss, Chase Claypool, Cole Kmet.
Good play.
Van Jefferson.
Great
That was
player,
that was the
okay.
end. 20 through 24.
You're a contender.
Yep.
You have something like those players in their first year too, which is not even like now.
Right.
Or you have Tyler Lockett.
Right.
You know,
As a contender, you'd always want Tyler Lockett.
you have to not worry about stuff like, first of all, the second round pick. These aren't NFL draft picks. Like the second round pick isn't as valuable as it is an NFL draft.
So I used 2 years just because who knows? We'll probably get 2 years out of some of these veterans, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't want to go too far back. Like it could be nothing. It could be you could get absolutely nothing out of that.
You
second
get Anthony
round
McFarland.
draft. Yes, you can get Anthony McFarland. You can get
Laviska Shenault.
Laviska
he gave
Shenault,
you
Brian
2
Edwards.
games.
No,
Bro,
you
Brian
can-
Edwards,
You
yeah.
can get absolutely zero out of some of these second round draft picks. You have all these high aspirations for these long-term things out of this second round draft pick, and it could be nothing, absolutely nothing. So getting a guy,
As much as we love Tank Bigsby and Roshan Johnson
Right.
and all of these
Oh, yeah.
guys, if 1 or 2 of them hits, we'll be thrilled.
exactly.
It's literally going out and buying a Mega Millions ticket when the Mega Millions is at like $1 billion, and you're sitting there. And I get it. The fun of it is thinking of all the stuff you're going to buy and what you're going to do with and who you're going to take care of. You know, like that's the fun part about it. And that same mystique and that same like draws there with draft picks too. But you have to realize as a dynasty player, those draft picks aren't as valuable as they seem. You know, because there's only so many spots for these players to fill into it. And a guy like Tyler Lockett, give him a late first, that puts your chances that. He's a player that literally increases your odds of winning a championship, and that's why we play the game.
I just went back to 2019 and almost barfed.
Oh, I'm sure. I was going to say 2020 was actually one of the better ones for second round. That was one of the best ones.
Just give me picks 20. Give me picks 20 through 24 because those are the final 4 in the playoffs.
Jace Sternberger,
Tight end
tight end
for the Patriots.
In case you're not aware, he was started with the Packers.
Packers, not Patriots. I meant to say. I knew it began with the Patriots.
Irv Smith, Justice Hill, Damian Harris, Hakeem Butler. And that was it. I was going to say Kelvin Harmon, who was the next pick in the 3rd round.
Kelvin Harmon.
Just a bunch of barf in your mouth. Yeah. Those guys are all terrible.
But when you go back into that
Harris.
draft class,
Damian Harris,
a little bit.
Yeah, but when you go back to those draft classes, you're making those players like, oh, Kelvin Harmon, dude. Like,
Yeah.
it was,
Here
wasn't Kelvin like a
Irv
second
Smith
or 3rd round pick?
Jr. I
Irv
can't
Smith.
believe I got him this late.
First, wasn't Irvis? Was he a second round pick?
He was a first round
pick.
No, second round.
So
NFL
second
pick.
rounder.
He was
Kelvin
second.
Harmon was pretty high pick.
We thought he was going to be. He fell.
He fell to the
Oh,
fifth
he fell
to the
round,
fifth.
6th
Okay.
round. 6th
Oh,
round.
that's right. We liked his tape.
Yeah,
That's right.
Him and Butler both. It was like, oh, these
Butler
guys
was
are kind of intriguing,
4th round draft
and
pick.
then they like fell super far.
Yep.
So when we talk about when we're talking about these players, when I say the word second round pick, you got to remember your contender. It's going to be a late second round pick, and the most important thing here, out of everything, this player is going to increase your odds of winning a championship.
Yep.
No player that Matt mentioned is even worth mentioning. But here's the thing. Even if you would have mentioned somebody like, I'm trying to think of somebody who kind of came out that wasn't great, but was really like solid back end of there.
Like a Darius Slayton. He ended
No,
up, he
not
was like
second round.
3rd
I'm
or
talking
4th.
about-
But
say if somebody came out and had like a good 2 year, like Darren Waller.
Okay.
Like later in the year, 2 good 2 years. That's nothing if you win a championship. I don't care like who it is. If you win a championship, that trumps everything, right? So like, I know when you say stuff like that out loud and some analyst can tell you like that you're wrong. And I would strongly disagree they're wrong. When you get players like that we're about to talk about now, some of these players will be like a guy like Tyler Lockett, DeAndre Hopkins, Michael Thomas. If they can increase your odds of winning, those picks are they're already almost meaningless. But you'll never remember that with these dynasty championships live forever. So Tyler Lockett, in my eyes, is a perfect guy that I think you probably get for like a second. You might have to even throw a 3rd on top. But again, you can't be afraid to do that either. Once somebody's like, I need a little bit more, and you're like, dude, I wouldn't start with a 3rd. I'm like, hey, I'll give you my 2nd and 4th. And sometimes that'll get it done. But they're like, no, I want your 3rd. You can't be like, oh, that's too much.
Yeah.
Because that 3rd.
Don't let me start reading 3rd round draft
the
picks.
the late 3rd round
don't
picks
even
are
let me-
even grosser.
Don't
So
even
like,
let me start, dude.
my view on those picks are, one, they're good lottery picks, right? Like you just hope one guy hits in every like 3 years. You hit one of those guys hits. But all my eyes are for is trades, like additions. Like, Eric, here's another shot for you in your Pelican. Here's a BB, in your BB gun that you got to go shoot that caterpillar in the eye at 100 yards away with. You know what I mean? Odds are you're going to miss almost
Yes.
every single time.
odds are with a BB gun 100 yards
But
away.
Caterpillar.
every now and then you're
Caterpillar.
walking up, you're
Eyeball.
seeing a caterpillar walking around looking like a pirate, going, "Oh, I can't wait to be a butterfly, matey."
Somebody did it.
Yeah, you know what I mean. So I'll be beautiful one day. All I got to do is melt down into nothing, spread my wings and fly into my dynasty championship. Guys like Stephon Diggs. So
that is the weirdest analogy I've ever heard. I love it.
You're welcome. Give me a guy that you're thinking about.
Yeah, one of the guys I had a high end guy, and we touched on him a little bit, Nick Chubb, and I think he's a little bit more obvious. You know, the Austin Ecklers, the Derrick Henrys. You know that these guys are absolute studs, and so sometimes it is worth paying that premium still a little more than maybe you're comfortable with for a player that old, for them to instantly jump in as your running back one or wide receiver one, and you don't have any worries about him for the next year or two. But I wanted to touch more on a guy that was a little farther down, and he's going relatively overlooked, which is interesting because he's been a top 12 tight end 3 times in the past 3 years, as high of a finish as tight end 3 during that span. That's Dalton Schultz. Currently his ADP is 137 right now, which is like middle of the 12th round. And when looking at Dalton Schultz, I was looking, and it's Bobby Slowick is the new offensive coordinator for Houston Texans. And the reason that was significant is he was the passing game coordinator the past few years with the 49ers. During that time, the lead tight end, George Kittle, was top 12 in targets every single year. And most of the time he was top 8, top 5 in targets every single year. They target their main tight end frequently. So I assume that's going to continue with Dalton Schultz. You add into the fact that Dalton Schultz has also been targeted inside the top 12 every single year over the past 3 years. So he's earned targets against CeeDee Lamb, and Amari Cooper was there for part of that. Like, he's earned targets with some really good other players around him. And then you factor in that there's nobody else, and you have a rookie quarterback that's going to be checking down to a tight end a lot. So he's one of those ones with tight end 17, you're paying tight end 2 prices. So he is an amazing backup to have. But if you need him to be your starter, I think points-wise, he'll put up enough to be able to still be, once again, a tight end 1 this year. So it's one of those ones where Dalton Schultz on your lineup doesn't look sexy at all. But he's one of those guys where, oh my gosh, Travis Kelce finally got hurt. Like, what do I do? Well, Dalton Schultz can fill in very admirably, and you could still win a ship with a guy like this.
I mean, he's somebody who's averaged 10.1 yards for his career, so he knows what to do when he gets the ball in his hands, knows to find the soft spots. You mentioned rookie quarterback, which is kind of a drag because like they usually don't produce numbers for those kind of players. But I think more importantly, this is a team that's going to be pretty bad. Mm-hmm. Their defense is pretty bad. They're going to have to throw the football.
Playing from behind.
Consistently playing from behind, and I think Dalton Schultz fought as a safety net. And I also think, honestly, one of my other guys here, too, just to kind of pile on it, is Robert Woods.
Sure.
Robert Woods comes in. He knows that system already inside and out, right? So he's going to come in, and his main competition is like Nico Collins, John Mechie. And I like Nico Collins. I do. I like him coming out of Michigan. I liked him a ton. But I think...
And I believe Mechie hasn't even had a chance to work out. He had a hamstring or something.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, he came back, obviously, from the leukemia, or not leukemia.
So...
Whatever he had.
The best...
Was it leukemia?
Some form of
cancer.
cancer.
It was leukemia. Yeah. But the best thing to do to help, like, build a rookie's confidence and make him, help him grow in the NFL is to help him find these targets, to help find these completions and make sure they get open. And having a guy like Dalton Schultz and Robert Woods on that team are 2 very good veterans for Bryce Young to come in that year 1. And maybe it's again, CJ Stroud. I'm sorry. Year 1. So I like both those buys.
They're the same player. It's fine.
Yeah. I think they're both great buys. And again, it's easy. Oh, Texans, yuck. But like, I'm looking for teams that are going to have negative defenses. They're going to be absolutely terrible. The Cardinals are going to be absolutely horrific on defense.
Yeah.
Horrific.
Note to everyone out there: you want offensive players with bad defenses. You know what I mean?
They're constantly trailing.
They're always, the pass catching ones anyway, because then they're always going to be getting lots of passes
and targets.
Hurry up offense.
Garbage time.
Hurry
all
up offense.
Yeah.
Dude, Robert Woods is going to he's going to win. He's going to win.
Yeah.
Routes. He's going to catch football. Dalton Schultz is going to win. So again, am I saying Robert Woods is going to be a stud? No, but if he can finish anywhere in the top 36, that's a win for a free player. Like you're talking, if you're going low on the for sale sign, like Robert Woods is costing you
nothing.
Probably a third. We say nothing because a third's nothing, but that's what he's probably going to. You probably get Robert Woods.
Probably get Woody.
Robert Woods. You might be able to get for a 4th, 5th.
You might be able to get Woody for a 4th. Dude.
He might cost nothing.
Yeah,
make me a sandwich.
He was the guy that I got kind of laughed at. I feel like early in the offseason when he was still on the Titans, before he got cut and all that, saying you should get this guy. I think he's going to get cut. His contract says he's going to get cut by the Titans, and he did. And he went to a situation that's better than the Titans, I feel like. Because he's for fantasy purposes, he's more or less the number one guy there.
How many inches of sub would you need for Robert Woods?
How many what?
Inches of sub.
I mean, if
I would take a 6-inch good sub.
$5 foot long. Yeah, I think probably 6 inches is fine.
So make sure.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, Robert Woods is not even on our current ADP, which goes to 248 players. So he's not even in the ADP. Wow. So he's really cheap.
Bobby Trees is free out there, people.
Yep.
I mean, and listen, and I love these kind of players. They're literally like, hey, if I get him for a 4th round pick, because a 4th round pick is literally nothing. That's pretty much nothing. Yeah, I'm all day. Again, if I'm a contender, because now you're talking about pretty much a 5th pick. Like, these are another perfect example. Dalton Schultz, Bobby Trees, players you go out there, scoop up in the cheap, depth, potential to give me something.
Players that are in our ADP. So he's going even lower than these guys. Parker Washington, A.T. Perry, Xavier Hutchinson.
Now I would take Xavier Hutchinson over.
I might take
team,
Hutchinson.
Right? He's on Houston, right?
Yep, same team.
Yes, he did.
I'll take
I
Xavier.
forgot he was on that team.
Elijah Higgins, who is a tight end, in case people didn't know.
I'm not gonna lie. I have no idea who Elijah Higgins is.
He's a rookie.
Rookie tight end.
He was a wide receiver convert to tight end.
So that just shows you the level.
Sixth round draft.
These guys this year were being taken 4th, 5th round.
Yeah.
Dude, it always blows my mind when I hear a player I don't know, and I put so much time into this game.
It happens every year.
I read and watch so much about football. Like, it's so hard for my brain to retain certain things. And then you hear
Wait,
these
this
names,
guy's
you're like,
real?
You're like, who is that guy? And you're like, oh yeah, he's a rookie. And I'm like, oh, those are my favorite kind of guys to swoop up. You know what I mean? Like, wow, I don't know who he is. Matt, is there anybody that you've been thinking about? Like, we've been talking about some of these veterans.
I mean, I mentioned Michael Thomas, and that was a guy that I kind of highlighted a little bit earlier. But the other guy is another Saint, and he switched teams this offseason. He went from Detroit, where he rushed for an absurd amount of touchdowns last year. It's Jamaal Williams, and I just feel like he right now is running back 43 in ADP. He's going 150th overall. And when you look in the trade finder, I saw like Zeke Elliott for Jamaal Williams straight up 3rd rounds, a 3rd and a 5th. There were a couple of 2nd rounders sprinkled in, but we just highlighted how like those 2nd round draft picks can be so hit or miss. They're ridiculous. But this is a guy that finished last year as a running back 15. And of course, it was mostly on the strength of the 17 touchdowns, right?
Yeah, I would say mostly.
He got over 1,000 yards last year.
He had over 1,000 yards.
He had 1,066
playing
yards.
touchdown only leagues. He's your guy.
Yeah, 17 touchdowns.
Color me tickled.
But the thing that the Saints really lacked last year was red zone scoring, touchdowns specifically. Their touchdown percentage was 52%, good for 21st in the league. And that was down from the year before, where it was 59%. They were 17th in the league. And way down from 2020, when they were 5th overall at 72%.
Drew Breesy.
So Drew Brees, but also these are almost direct correlations with Alvin Kamara's scoring.
Decline.
Yeah. So you look at Kamara's stats over that same period of time, and specifically his touchdowns. And last year he had 4 total touchdowns, and by the way, 4 fumbles. Not really something he had a problem with any other year. He had a couple years with maybe 1, but mostly 0. 2019, he had 9 total touchdowns. 2020, when they were amazing, he had 21 total touchdowns. So it also, you look at their record last year, 7-10. The year before, 9-8. The year before that, 12-4. So there's like some pretty easy correlations to if you're a coach, hey, what are we missing?
Run the ball.
Oh crap, our red zone efficiency is terrible. Oh, there's this free agent running back that's amazing in the red zone and scores a ton of touchdowns.
All he does.
This dude is going to get work. They have a role for him. I think it's going to end up being Alvin Kamara between the 20s. Jamaal Williams, you're running like crazy, in that area. You're going to get us first downs. You're going to get us touchdowns. And we're going to be efficient this year, damn it. Because like you mentioned earlier, defensive-minded head coach, he wants to run the ball. He wants to control this kind of stuff. He's going to want to be able to score touchdowns in the red zone instead of settling for field goals and crap like that. So Jamaal Williams, while I don't think he's going to ever get to the running back 15 that he did last year, he's just not going to get that kind of usage here because Alvin Kamara is good. They brought in a rookie as well. He is going to still score touchdowns. He is going to outwork his value as far as running back 43. And for a third-round draft pick, that is great value. If something happens to Kamara, if he ends up getting some sort of suspension from this thing that happened 3 years ago, which seemingly has just vanished and disappeared. So I don't really think he's ever going to get any sort of suspension for that.
I'm starting to think he's not going to. He's probably a great buy too because I'm starting to think like he's not even going to get suspended at this point.
But if he does, huge value, right? I mean, and for that stretch of time, he's going to be able to win you games. And for a third-round draft pick, I'm all for it. Second rounders, I'm a little bit iffy because he is on the older side, 28 years old.
And I think the biggest thing that would worry me about him there, for me personally, is strictly Kendre Miller.
Yeah.
That's a huge concern for me outside of the Alvin Kamara role as well. But a guy, do you know his money on that deal? Did you look that up? Because I know that would kind of help my cause a little bit.
So I looked at Alvin Kamara's money, and Alvin Kamara's money after this year, they can actually get out from underneath that contract and save $2 million, and that's a straight up. If they cut him straight up, but if they post June 1st him, they can actually save about $10 million. So
there's a good chance this is last year for Kamara.
With Kamara's decline and all his stats kind of across the board, and Kamara's stats have always been all about the receptions, and it was 82, 81, 81, 83. 47, 57 the past 2 seasons. So he is on this pretty easy to see cliff after Drew.
It makes sense. Drew Brees is gone.
Drew Brees left.
Old quarterbacks check down more than young quarterbacks.
Exactly. And dude's 27 years old. He's going to be 28 at the end of July here. So he is right at this ripe age where the running backs just kind of disappear and fall off a cliff. So Jamaal Williams, I think he's going to have a nice little short window here in this season where he's got some value. Could it go and overlap into next year where it's Kendre Miller and Jamaal Williams as kind of the 1-2 punch? Possibly, and that would be bonus. Sure. You know what I mean? That'd be icing on the cake type of stuff.
This kind of reminds me of the Miami situation, this backfield. You know, like with Devon A-Chain, like you have the rookie, so like kind of Kendre Miller, obviously he's a little different because he's a pass catcher. He can pick, and he's super fast, but they also have Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson. This team has Alvin Kamara, Kendre Miller, and Jamaal Williams. And obviously Jamaal Williams last year, super successful. So interesting, but like a risk that the reward could be pretty solid.
It could be solid, and it could be, I guess, a little bit longer than I had expected.
I think third round pick should get it done for Jamaal Williams,
and that's where I feel comfortable. The second rounders, I'm a little bit iffy on those because I think you get better bang for your buck somewhere else with the second round.
Other players,
Like you start like I think when you start starting second rounder, like you're talking Joe Mixon. You know what I mean? Like I'm looking for somebody who's for sure at that point, and then I'm giving my second and third. Like once I know Joe Mixon's still on the team, here's my second and third. Aaron Jones, second and third. Yeah. If Alvin Kamara doesn't get suspended, second and third. You know, like things along those lines. But another good, solid, like better. He falls that category, that old running back who's kind of like put off by the side.
So he's old, but he's never had like the full workload anywhere. You know what I mean? He's got more tread than the average 28-year-old, in my opinion. Anyway, I mean he's always shared it in Green Bay. Even last year, you know, he shared it. I think he had 262. That was by far the most carries he's ever had in his career. 262, by almost double. You know, so he's had a very light workload for a guy that's been in the league this long.
All right.
You got another guy or good?
I think we're good.
So the moral story here is when you play Dynasty, there is a room there to grab these veterans, even if you're rebuilding, to find future value. And that's a good strategy to have. You should always keep it in mind. You know, like when you play Dynasty, everything's, you know, should be on the table. Like people ask me like, would you be willing to trade this player? I always have the same response. I would trade any player for the right offer. This one's going to cost you
a lot more than the other.
Willing to pay.
Yeah.
But never be afraid of veterans. Definitely if you're a contender, go out there, acquire the depth. Don't ever listen to people say he's only got 2 more years left. He's got 1 more year. I'm going to end it by saying this. We play the game for one reason and one reason only, and it's to win Dynasty Fantasy Football Championships. And your goal throughout the process and throughout our process while we do this podcast and give our opinions is because We want to put some time in and kind of like all the time we put into this game, kind of regurgitate the information because we all have the same goal as well, and that's to win Dynasty Fantasy Football Championships. The amount of draft picks you have, the amount of youth you have on your roster, none of that ever matters if it doesn't lead to a ship.
Right.
It really doesn't. So when there's an opportunity to go out there to increase your odds for pennies on a dollar, and I would consider anything from a second round pick on pennies on the dollar, then you should be out there spending pennies.
Making those moves, man.
Yeah.
Spend those pennies.
Take this, Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah, people, they'll laugh. Like, Rich, you always trade your draft picks. You always trade your draft picks. If I'm a contender, I'm always trading my draft picks. Because then when you start mentioning the word first, now you're getting players like Saquon Barkley. Like, when you start throwing first plus,
Austin Eckler,
you're getting really
Derrick
good
Henry's,
players.
Nick Chubb's.
So you definitely shouldn't be afraid. Like, definitely if you're a contender, like, I'm just talking about value veterans. This is what we were talking about here, value. Mm-hmm. You mentioned Nick Chubb. You mentioned we didn't mention like a guy like Amari Cooper, 2 Browns. Mm-hmm. Saquon Barkley's out there. These guys are like 26. Like even Austin Eckler, a first. Christian McCaffrey. If you can get a first plus,
Right.
Like Eckler's probably borderline like first. You probably gotta give your second too. Worth it.
Yeah.
Worth it.
Mm-hmm.
You can't be hindered about what's on the other side of the rainbow because the odds are you're never even going to see the other side of the rainbow.
Just make sure you're actually a contender. Don't fool yourself into thinking you're a contender.
Well, that's where the
and
Dynasty
then
GMs comes
buy a bunch of running backs only to realize you're not a contender.
And I want to say that too because
that's a terrible investment if you're not actually a contender.
Listen, if somebody wanted to say like, what's the best part of the GM app? Like, what's the best thing? And I would say the best thing by getting into the Nerd Herd and getting that app on there, and you can look at it for free, but just download the app, is a league analyzer.
Yep.
It'll
tell you right away if you actually are a contender or not.
So easy.
Yep.
To get caught in the middle. We did a show on that already about why it's easy to get caught in the middle, right? Because you have all these people tanking, you have the really good teams, so you think your team's good, but it's really not. The best thing to do for your team is to get a bird's eye view of it. Not stop looking at your app when you're going from one team to another and look at your team and all your draft capital you have or upside you have, but see the whole league as a whole.
Yep.
Because that's who you're competing against.
Flip that contender tab over.
So check out the app. Check us out. We'll be back next week talking more Dynasty Fantasy Football. And our next show we're doing
games.
We've done a game in a long time.
I can't wait. I'm so excited.
A lot of good content coming to these games. So
Me too.
and I'll say the word and as long as I can
These are my favorites.
Oh, yeah.
on today. I mean, it only counts as like how long I can say it for July 5th. Like it's not going to be like on my gravestone. Unless
Or is it?
Hit the over.
Adios.
Nailed it.